First of all, look at all the rate hikes, which I've done since the early 80s, okay? This is the biggest one in basis points raised. They don't have to do any more now. This hits, folks. Everybody should know this. 12-month lag. The 12-month lag on the March to recent raise in rates will just start to hit right about now in April and hit harder into early next year. I think the economy is going to weaken no matter what they do. They're dumbasses. The Fed has been you cannot run an economy on nonstop stimulus. You cannot say you believe in free markets and then not let the markets be free and correct and wash out debt and zombie companies when it needs to.
Economists and best-selling author Harry Dent has no confidence whatsoever in the U.S. Federal Reserve, Treasury Department, and other departments in charge of the nation's finances. Like other expert analysts that have been warning about the rate-to-fail nature of the U.S. economy, Dent believes the Federal Reserve and Treasury Department do not have their priorities right when it comes to economic policies, impacting the world's greatest economy. As a result, Dent is predicting a massive recession for the United States in the latter part of the year. In a recent interview with the Crypto Banter, a 69-year-old economist alongside popular technical analyst Gareth Soloway discusses his outlook on the U.S. economy, as the country faces one of its most urgent economic situations in at least a decade. He believes the next rate hike, which the FOMC will announce on May 2nd, will be the last one until the committee realizes that everything is about to go through the roof. He also believes that the United States economy has been weakened by 13 years of stimulus, and the Fed's insistence on viewing periods of economic downturns as poisonous. Dent urges that the economy should be allowed to experience recessions and depressions just like it does periods of economic growth and expansion. He adds that is the only way that the economy will begin a slow recovery.
This should be the last rate hike. First of all, I think the Fed finally, now this is 13 years of stimulus, okay? Any economy after 2009 that needs 13 years of nonstop stimulus is fundamentally weak, as demographics told me way before 2008, 2023 would be a weak period between the baby boom generation peak and the millennials surging again, okay? So they've been fighting this for a long time, but I think this was a critical mistake here. He overreacted to COVID. COVID was an outside influence, short-term virus, nothing wrong with the economy. $5 trillion in monetary stimulus and $5 trillion in fiscal commitment, 10 trillion, 50% of GDP stimulus. And that's what took us from 1% inflation overnight to 9.1% inflation. And then the Fed was forced to reverse from endless stimulus to tightening. And I say this economy is weak underneath. It's been living totally on stimulus, and it will not react well to this tightening. And I do think that's going to continue to show up. And this will be the last rate hike, 25 basis points. But I think we're going to be in a recession faster than people think. And it's not a normal, oh, the economy's overstretched, blah, blah, blah. This is a second financial asset bubble, bigger than the first one. This one totally artificial. And therefore, it's this bubble bursting in financial assets. And the top 20% that own 90% of financial assets are 50% of consumer spending. So I see a different type of recession that may turn into a short-term depression. It's just a deflation of the second major unprecedented financial asset bubbles. You had the roaring 20s, then you had the 90s, which was a natural bubble with some stimulus. This one is all stimulus, which means it's more artificial, more weak, and I think the market's falling is what's going to tip. I'm looking at the Russell 2000, the most clear chart to me right now, sideways triangle after this first big crash, which did signal to me a long-term top. It was big enough for that. We break 1700 here, 3% lower in here, the markets are going to head down. I think the markets or the financial asset bubble falling is going to draw us into this unique recession, because the affluent people that drive 50% of spending are going to get their asses kicked harder than any time in history. Cannot run an economy on nonstop stimulus. You cannot say you believe in free markets and then not let the markets be free and correct and wash out debt and zombie companies when it needs to. That's what free markets do the best. It's not just success in entrepreneurialism and capitalism, it's failure. It's allowing failure. So this is a huge misunderstanding. I think the Federal Reserve understands nothing about the economy. How many of these guys him included. Janet Yellen, for crying out loud, looked like she came out of a nunnery, okay? How many of these people have ever run a business or even had sex? Seriously. And they run our economy. Well, I mean, I really don't think all they do, they say, oh, he's doing a good job. If the economy's strong, they tighten, and if it's weak, they loosen. A 2-year-old could do, okay, a 4-year-old could do that. I would say the Fed is not in the business of regulating and driving the economy. It should have emergency injections when there's a real emergency. And COVID was a bit of that, but that would have meant a one-time injection. I would have had no problem with a trillion injection in the early 2009 and that downturn, and maybe something like that in COVID short term. But to keep saying the economy has to go up and we can't, to say we can't have a recession, we would have no economy without recessions. If you don't understand that recessions are just as important in booms, like sleep is just as important as waking, then you don't understand the damn economy. So I don't think these people know anything. I don't think the Fed should be in the business. They should be providing enough money to conduct business and responding when there's a real short-term emergency, short-term. They should not be in charge of preventing recessions, which are the most fruitful thing the economy ever does. I know I was a turnaround manager for my first decade to small entrepreneurial businesses. I can make 10 times the change in a downturn I could when everybody's complacent in an upturn. Downturns, recessions are not bad. If you don't want a big recession, don't have a bubbly boom and overstimulate. And we've been stimulating nonstop for 13 years until last year.
And I think it's important, and what Harry's saying is absolutely correct, is that when you have a baseline, right, if you just keep recessions so the booms are just a little up, then the recessions are a little down. It's when you stimulate, you create the huge bubble, which in response then has to have the big downside as well. It's just the nature of life, right? I mean, if you're going to do a lot of drugs, you're going to have a big crash on the other side. I mean, it's the same kind of principle there. So definitely 100%. I do see a recession coming in the second half of this year. I'm looking at it in terms of the jobs data. We're starting to see that crack in the last report. I think we get another one next Friday. We've seen the inflation numbers come down, but not enough to enable the Fed to step in. And that's the key, right? So getting inflation from 9% down to 5%, easy, right? I mean, that's just, supply chain starts to work again, all that stuff. It's that last, 5 to 2 that's going to be the trickiest thing. And I think that's where people in the market, for me, I look at the stock market, I'm slowly moving in more and more into the short side of the S&P and the NASDAQ. And that's purely from the aspect of investors are in this phase of saying, okay, the Fed will rescue us no matter what, because we've been conditioned just like an animal. The bell rings and you run to get the food. That's the way the market investors are. The Fed, the difference here is that with inflation north of, let's say, 3%, I don't see how they stimulate in the same way, because then they're going to send inflation at 20%. Instead of 9, it's 20, right? And so that's going to be a shock for the investing public when they finally realize the Fed can't bail them out. Now, it's not to say the Fed's not eventually going to come to the rescue. We know the Fed is notorious for moving goalposts. Eventually 3% inflation will be fine. Eventually 4%, and it'll just become the norm. So yeah, I think recession second half. I'm not predicting a depression at this point. I think that comes later in the decade with the 100-year cycle, just like COVID and the Spanish flu. But I think this is the beginning of that table setting for it.
Dent's recession forecast is shared by Soloway. There must be a purpose for economic cycles, claims Gareth Soloway. Expansion followed by contraction, with some contractions being more severe than others. However, recessions are expected to be even more severe when the economy has not been artificially stimulated and inflated to this extent. Do you agree with Dent and Soloway's assessment of the state of the American economy? Feel free to share your thoughts and reactions in the space provided below. Thanks for watching Market Empire, where we keep you up to date with the latest developments in the financial world. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more exciting content. Don't forget to hit the bell icon to get notified when we post new videos. Until next time, happy investing!